For those of you that know me, it doesn't take too long to get to know me and realize that I am not a very loud person. I'm usually pretty quiet. You would think that I don't enjoy getting up in front of people, and that definitely used to be the case whenever I first started playing music. I think I'm going to fix that real fast. There we go. All right. Tube amplifiers. Yeah, they make lots of sound. Anyways, you know that you would think that I wouldn't like to get up in front of people, but I will say that I've been looking forward to speaking to you guys for a while. I've known that I'm going to speak on this day, and I've known what I'm going to talk about, and it's on the topic of rest. I'm going to use the term rest. I'm going to use the term Sabbath. I'm going to use the term healthy spiritual rest. And all I want you to know is I'm just talking about a block of time that we set aside that's directed towards God. Whenever I use the term Sabbath, I don't necessarily mean like the Jewish Sabbath and a full Saturday. I don't necessarily mean what we think of as a Christian Sabbath and this full Sunday. I simply mean a time of rest. So you're going to hear me use some of those terms. How many of you this morning are tired? Raise your hand. Go ahead. All right. How many of you have been in a busy season? You feel like you're running from place to place. You've been really busy. Raise your hand. It's okay. Maybe you're running places. Maybe you're running your kids' places. Yes, we are a busy culture. We are a tired culture. And so you may be looking forward to this sermon on rest. You may think that you are just going to sit back and relax, and you're going to be like, oh, come on, preach it, preacher. Yeah, let's hear it. No, it's not going to be one of those sermons. I am excited for you to hear it, and I think you will want to hear it. But the reason that I've been so excited to speak to you is because I truly think we need to hear it. As people of God, I think our culture needs to hear it. As believers in Christ, I think that we need to hear it. So rest. It's a familiar word. We've all heard the word, but it seems to be a very unfamiliar experience. Those of you that know me also know very clearly that I have a musical background. Music has always been a part of my life. Rhythm has always been a part of my life. My family will tell you that, and that's probably my beard. Yeah, we thought that'd cause issues too. My family will tell you that ever since I was a young boy, I was beating on anything and everything. Whether it was spoons on pots and pans in the kitchen, or the headrest in front of me in the car, or on the floor. I always had lots of toys. My parents and my grandparents and all my family, they would spoil me. But one of the things that I did most is I would just sit in front of the TV and I'd have a drumstick or two, and I'd just be beating all the time. And it's funny that I use this as an illustration because last night Hannah and I were watching a movie, and I'm like tapping the whole time on anything and everything, and she's like, stop, 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 because I'm always tapping. But we know that in music, in any rhythm, rest is an important part of it. Rest is just as important as the noise that we make in a rhythm. If we didn't have rest in music, it would just be busy sound. It wouldn't be entertaining to us. And so many times those rests fall in a place where they can have the most emphasis, a dramatic part in the song, right? Right after a bridge, you have a cutout. You've been building up, and you cut out, and you have this rest. And it's so dramatic, right? And so we know that rest is important in rhythm, and I think it's also important in the rhythm of our daily lives. We live in a busy world, and last week Joshua, towards the end of his sermon, he compared this idea of work and working hard to busyness. I do believe there's some of us that truly are workaholics, but I believe most of us, we're probably just busy. And so I want to ask a few questions. There's 6 of them here, and if you can answer 2 or more of them, you probably, on some level, have some sort of a busy schedule or maybe a workaholic. So here's the first question. Are you always in a hurry? Are you always in a hurry? I would like to think that I'm a pretty calm, laid-back person, but there are times, and Hannah will tell you this as well, when I am always in a hurry. She's trying to talk to me, she's trying to tell me something, and my eyes are just like all over. I can only focus on one thing at once. I got something else to do. Joshua and Melanie here in the office, they'll tell you that I lose things all the time. And like that doesn't seem like me. I think I'm pretty organized, but it's because I'm just focused on the next thing, and I, boom, set keys down. Boom, set my wallet down. And I'm like, where'd they go? Where'd they go? So many times Melanie's had to stay late and help me search for my keys so that I can get home. So sometimes I'm in a hurry. My grandpa and I are real close, and Grandpa has like this other speed to life about him that is super slow. He savors each and every minute. He savors each and every bite of food that he takes. So many times we'll have dinner at my grandparents' house and we'll eat our meal. I'll eat dessert and I'll be in watching football and Grandpa's still finishing up his meal. And he's the only one left at the table. So he moves at a slow pace. But yeah, sometimes I'm in a hurry. Is your to-do list impossibly long? Do you have so many things on it that there's no way you could ever get that accomplished in a week? And so you end up moving it back a week and moving it back another week and moving it back another week. You may be a busy person or you may be a workaholic. Do you use your days off to catch up on unfinished work? You have a day off and you go in and work. Has more than one person ever told you to slow down? What about this? Do you feel guilty while relaxing? Do you feel some guilt whenever you're relaxing? What about this last one? Do you have to literally get sick to take time off? You never slow down because you're always busy, that your body literally runs itself ragged to where you get so sick, and then you finally take time off. Well, before we go any further, I want to get this out there. I'm not an advocate for laziness. I don't like to associate with lazy people. I never want to be thought of as being lazy. I like hard work. I want to be a hard worker. But lazy and rest, they are two completely different things. So rest, why? Well, we see this idea of Sabbath, of healthy spiritual rest, all throughout Scripture, specifically the Old Testament. And we see it from the very beginning of creation in Genesis 2. I'm going to read verses 1 through 3. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation. From the very beginning, God has put an emphasis on rest. And it's probably not that God needed rest because he didn't have any more energy because he was so tired. It's because God saw that rest was important. So he set this precedent. He put this emphasis on rest. He blessed it. He made it holy, this Sabbath day. It's so cool to me that our God didn't set aside a mountain or a temple or a spring to go to and to receive energy and rejuvenation and relaxation, but rather he set apart a time that we can come to him, we can truly receive rest, we can truly receive energy and be rejuvenated, and we can celebrate who we are in him. A time that we create, and then we come to him and he allows us to be recreated. God created, he rests, and then he is recreated. Moving along through Scripture, we see it in Exodus. It was commanded to the Israelites through Moses, this idea of Sabbath or of rest. And it was always, in Scripture, rest, Sabbath, healthy spiritual rest, it was always this celebration. It wasn't this sitting back in a recliner and just taking a nap or just watching football or Netflix. No, it was a celebration. It was a celebration of who we are as believers, and it was a celebration of community. It was always done communally with one another. That was Sabbath. And so here we go, Exodus 16. This is what the Lord has commanded. Tomorrow is a day of solemn rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you will bake and boil what you will boil, and all that is left over lay aside to be kept till the morning. So they laid it aside till the morning as Moses commanded them, and it did not stink, and there were no worms in it. Moses said, "Eat it today, for today is a Sabbath to the Lord. Today you will not find it in a field. 6 days you shall gather it, but on the seventh day, which is a Sabbath, there will be none." On the seventh day some of the people went out together, but they found none. And the Lord said to Moses, "How long will you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws? See, the Lord has given you the Sabbath. Therefore, the sixth day he gives you bread for 2 days. Remain each of you in his place. Let no one go out of his place on the seventh day." So the people rested on the seventh day. And again, I want to make clear, this sermon, I'm not talking about a specific day, Sunday, to set aside. And they did have a specific day in the Jewish culture in the Old Testament that they set aside. But remember, just a chunk of time that we set aside to God. So anyways, that scripture, it begs this question. When I think I'm working extra, it very well could be busyness, am I actually accomplishing more? Am I actually getting more work done by working extra than I would if I were to rest and to have energy and to be rejuvenated so then that I can give God my best through my work? Is it worship whenever we're working ragged because we're so worn out? Is that worship to God? Do you really think that is? Or is it worship to God whenever we have this restful soul, restful spirit, and we're able to truly give God our best through our work? It reminds me of this company, Chick-fil-A. It's one of my favorite places to eat. There's been many times, specifically when I was in college and living in Joplin, that I would pull into Chick-fil-A on a Sunday, and I wanted an 8-piece nugget, and I would large size the waffle fries and large size the sweet tea. Oh. And I would pull in. I totally forgot. They're closed on Sundays. They're only open 6 days a week. If you know anything about Chick-fil-A, they have been growing so rapidly the last 5 to 10 years. I mean, they have grown huge. They're one of the largest fast food companies now in the world, and every other company, McDonald's, Wendy's, Taco Bell, everyone is looking to Chick-fil-A and trying to model what they do because their customer service is second to none. A quick side note, if you haven't been to Chick-fil-A, you should go check out the one on South Range Line just so you can experience their customer service. You can't go today because it's a Sunday. You'll have to go tomorrow. But the one on South Range Line is ranked #1 in the world in customer service. So if you want to experience Chick-fil-A, go to the one on South Range Line. But anyways, so they're this super large fast food company, and they're only open 6 days. Yet God is able to provide 7 days worth of finances, income, labor, whatever you want to call it. God provides 7 days worth of good in 6 days. And it's not like they're open more hours other days in the week to make up for the day that they're closed. No, they're the same as every other fast food restaurant, yet they're closed on Sunday. And God is able to provide, just like he was to the Israelites, somehow in God's miraculous ways, in 6 days, God is able to provide everything that we need. 7 days worth of goods. The hours in which we stay busy during the week is not worship to God, but rather the true work, the hard work in which we do is worship to God. There's another Old Testament text moving on through Exodus chapter 31 that I want to read to you just to show you how important in God's eyes that healthy spiritual rest is. Exodus 31, verse 12 through 18. And the Lord said to Moses, "You are to speak to the people of Israel and say, above all, you shall keep my Sabbath. For this is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I, the Lord, sanctify you. You shall keep the Sabbath because it is holy for you. Everyone who profanes it shall be put to death. Whoever does any work on it, that soul shall be cut off from among his people. 6 days shall work be done, but the 7th day is a Sabbath of solemn rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath day shall be put to death. Therefore, the people of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, observing the Sabbath throughout their generations is a covenant forever. It is a sign forever between me and the people of Israel that in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, and on the 7th day he rested and was refreshed. And he gave to Moses, when he had finished speaking with him on Mount Sinai, the 2 tablets of the testimony, tablets of stone, written with the finger of God." This was after God gave Moses the 10 Commandments. This was after God told the Israelites how they were to live. He told them how they were to live, what they were to sacrifice, how they were to dress, how they were to build certain things. He gave them all these different rules and laws for how they were to live. And then he comes back and he says, above all, honor my Sabbath. Above everything that I've told you, honor my Sabbath. Keep my Sabbath. It's blessed. It's holy. And he even says that if you do any work on the Sabbath day, you shall be put to death. It's a sign. It's a covenant. Just like, God tells us that the rainbow is a covenant that he will never flood the earth again. Time, rest, is a covenant between God and his people. I want to address this before we go any further because here's an argument that you will hear in regards to Christians being called to Sabbath or to rest. You never find it in the New Testament. Well, first I would say, yeah, you're somewhat right. Technically, we don't find that idea of a literal Sabbath, a specific day that we're supposed to do certain things and not do certain things. Yeah, we don't find that in the New Testament. You know what? There's lots of other things we don't find in the New Testament. We don't find giving 10% in the New Testament anywhere. It's just not there. It's in the Old Testament. Yet we still think that it's a good idea to give 10%. But the New Testament calls us to give everything, to give our all, for our life to be a life of giving. So I look at the Sabbath the same way. Old Testament, it establishes this time of rest that we set aside each week to give to God that we can celebrate him as creator, provider, and sustainer. And ultimately, our goal is to have a healthy rhythm of life where rest naturally flows out of our everyday rhythm. But second, we do see rest all throughout the New Testament. Jesus draws away time and time again because he needs rest. Even Jesus, the Son of God, didn't do ministry all the time. He wasn't around people all the time. In fact, he turned down some people that needed to be healed because he needed to rest. And I'm sure that he honored the Jewish Sabbath as well, but he also just drew away and he rested. Him and his disciples, they would draw away and they would rest. I don't know about you, but this idea that God calls us to rest is this weird concept to me. I'd never really heard of it until March 5th, 2013, whenever I heard my first sermon that I'd ever heard on Sabbath and the importance of it. And I started to put that into my life, and I started to model Sabbath. I started out once a month, and I try to weekly make time to where I can Sabbath. It seems like this weird concept, though. I think for many people, the Sabbath is just one of those things that it just seems like, yeah, God said something about that, but it's, it's strange. We just push it aside. The Jewish people obviously lost sight of what the Sabbath was intended to be. It eventually became about this list of things to not do on the Sabbath, and that list was more important than actual rest and time with God was. And same thing moving on with the Pharisees. I'm sure that the list, the things that you weren't supposed to do on the Sabbath was more important than the actual Sabbath itself. But this Sabbath day, it's supposed to be a day of freedom. It's supposed to be a day of celebration where we can celebrate who we are in Jesus. And the reason we have Sabbath in the first place is because of God's ability to create, sustain, and provide for us. That's why we honor Sabbath. The Sabbath is a day in which God's people are called to think, to feel, and to act differently. Or rest. Rest is a time in which God's people are called to think, to feel, and to act differently. We are called to do something that doesn't remind us of what we normally do. It doesn't remind us of our daily schedule. It's truly this highlight to our week, this highlight of living. Are you experiencing this highlight of living? How many vacation days of yours go unused every year? I know there's been some studies done, I can't even remember the number, but it's in the millions, the number of vacation days that don't get used every day or every year in the United States. What does it say whenever we don't rest as people of God? What does it say whenever we don't set aside time, enjoyable time, something that we get to do, sometime that we get to do something that we enjoy doing, something special, to acknowledge God for who he is, a celebration? What does it say when we don't set aside time like that? It honestly says that we don't believe that God is who he says he is. It says that we don't trust God because we think we have to go into work that extra day, because we think we have to do something in order to get more income or to accomplish our goals or to meet those numbers that our company has set for us. Because we want to do it ourselves. We don't trust God to do it. And so we don't think that we have this time to rest because we want to do it ourselves. It says that we don't trust God. He calls us, he's commanded us as people of God to rest. When we don't rest because we have too much stuff to do, because we're too busy, we're telling him that we don't trust him as creator, sustainer, and provider. We don't think he's going to continue to create in us or sustain us or to continue to provide for us. When we find ourselves in a boat, much like the Israelites did, where we go out on the seventh day and then there's nothing to be had. So, we've talked about this idea of rest. How do we rest? How do we rest? As people of God, as Christians, how do we rest? Obviously, the Jewish people had this day of Sabbath that was just a standard for them to live by, where they didn't do any work. But how do we as Christians rest? I think this is an interesting way to put rest that I've heard. The Sabbath or rest is an active day of non-labor, or an active time of non-labor. It's an interesting way to put it. It's not sitting in a recliner watching football or watching Netflix. It's not napping. It's an experience not counted in minutes in which we turn towards God in a way that we don't get to on a daily basis. It's something different. It's something special. It's a celebration. So many times we think of rest or healthy spiritual rest as solitude. And I think that sometimes they do interchange. And I think they also have their place in being separate. Sabbath and solitude are two totally different things. Healthy spiritual rest, as in an idea of this time of Sabbath, was always done as a celebration. It was meant to be done in community with one another. And solitude is just us, ourselves, and God. And I think that we can rest and have solitude. I think we can have some of both. But it was always intended to be done in community. The Sabbath, or rest, it's not about us. It's not because we need rest, although we do. It's about God. It's directed towards God. Sabbath is a celebration of the character of God and a celebration of a community of believers. I saw this illustration one time. If you look at the Ten Commandments, the first three commandments deal with the relationship between humanity and things heavenly, things godly. The last six commandments deal with humanity and neighbor, how we are to interact with our neighbor, how we are to live with our neighbor. And then randomly there's this weird commandment that falls in at number 4 that says to honor the Sabbath. And one of my professors, he's now on staff at Christ Church of Oronogo, Peter Buckland, he had this quote, that Sabbath, or rest, is where heaven and earth commingle. And what a cool image of the Ten Commandments, that Sabbath is this time that falls right in the middle of things heavenly and things earthly. There's this mystery to resting. There's this mystery to Sabbath. Yet we're called to do it. It bridges the gap between heavenly things and earthly things. Personally, when I experience Sabbath, I like to bring my best. I told you that on March 5th, 2013, I heard a sermon on Sabbath, and I felt really convicted that I was in a busy season of life. I was going to college. I felt like all I was doing was just work nonstop, and I wasn't resting. I was stressed out. I was depressed. I wasn't sleeping well, and I wasn't resting. So anyways, some of my friends and I, we got together, and we decided that it would be a good thing to Sabbath, and we committed to once a month. We would set aside a day or an afternoon, a good chunk of time where we would Sabbath. And we would bring our best. And remind you, we were college students. We didn't have very much money. But we would get steak or we would get barbecue, and we would go out and we would have a full day. And we would do things that we enjoy. We would fish, we would kayak, we would shoot guns. And we didn't use Sabbath as just this excuse in order for us to do these fun things. No, we were truly Sabbathing. We were celebrating our community with one another. We were outside in creation, which seems to be the most natural way to experience and see God's beauty. And yeah, we would set apart time where we would have solitude as well. We would break away and, into the woods and read our Bibles for a half hour and then come together and eat, break bread together. It was fun. Rest is something that should be enjoyed. It's a change of pace from our normal routine. It's meant to be done differently. I love being outside. Anyone that knows me knows that I love being outside. I love to fish. I love to hunt. I love to sit around a fire. I love being outside. And so many times whenever I Sabbath and I'm outside, I wonder if, like last year, Hannah and I took a vacation and we went to Glacier National Park, and we went to Yellowstone and the Grand Tetons, and there were so many wonderful views. And I wonder, if God can do that with an inanimate object, what can he do with me? If God can do that with something that's non-living, and if we can see God in that, how much more should people be able to see God in us? So we've looked at these scriptures, and we've acknowledged the New Testament issue. And I hope that we would come to a point where we agree as Christians that it's probably a good idea to rest. That we would agree that God has called us to rest. To set aside our busyness, set aside our work, and to truly rest. I don't know where to start. I don't know how to make time. I don't know what to cut out in my schedule. Here's a few things to get you thinking. First off, in regards to what Joshua said last week in comparing work and busyness, are you truly working or are you just busy? Because if you're just busy, it'll be pretty easy to make some extra time in your schedule. Are you truly working or are you just busy? And you may be truly working. And then we can figure out a way to make more time in your schedule, trust me. What about this? Does this actually need to be done right now? Does this actually need to be done this week before I go into work on Monday? And who thinks that it needs to be done right now? Do I think that it needs to be done right now? Does the company that I work for think it needs to be done right now? My boss? Who thinks that this needs to be done right now? Because it may not need to be done right now. Third, advice that I would give to you is to plan a day of rest. Plan ahead, an afternoon. Commit to doing this like once every 2 weeks. If you'll commit to taking an afternoon, or maybe it's a Saturday morning, I don't know, whenever it fits in your schedule best. Plan for a day of rest. And aside from a death in the family, nothing is going to change that day. You are going to take an afternoon on Fridays from lunchtime until you return home, and you're going to have a day of rest. Or maybe it's Saturday morning. You're going to take a Saturday morning from 8 to noon, and you're going to have a day of rest. Kids in the room, maybe you can help your parents with this. Maybe they have so many things to do around the house, and a Saturday morning would work great for the kids to wake up and to help clean the house or do laundry or mow the yard. And that way parents can draw away and they can have a day of rest. I hear so many conversations going on right now. Yeah, it's a good idea. You can do that. Commit to 4 or more hours in a continuous chunk of time once every 2 weeks to rest. If you'll commit to 4 or more hours, some of you may need 6 or 8 just to slow down, to clear your mind. Number 2, do something you don't normally do. Get away from home, get away from normal activities, and do something different. Make sure it's something you enjoy and make it special. Like, don't go buy like the cheapest lunch meat and the worst hot dogs in the world. No, make it special. Go buy a porterhouse steak and freeze it and put it in a backpack and then take out hiking and start a fire and cook this steak. Do you realize that I'm giving you permission to do this? Is that cool? Yes, go all out. Make this a celebration of who God is and who you are in Him. Number 3, be intentional about this time of rest being focused towards God. We need to remind ourselves, it's not about us. We do need rest as human beings. We do need rest. But Sabbath, healthy spiritual rest, is not about us. It's about God. So go out in creation. Acknowledge who He is. Be able to see beautiful scenes. Do something you enjoy. Don't make it just a burden on yourself, something that you don't want to do. It doesn't have to be a Bible study. You can go out, you can listen to music that you don't get to on a normally basis. Listen to worship. Maybe you don't like the worship music that we do here in church on a Sunday morning. Sabbath or rest is a time for you to do something that you like. Listen to music that you enjoy. Do activities that you enjoy. Number 4, as much as possible, and I know it's hard, but as much as possible, try to experience rest in community. Get your friends, get your small group. Men in the room, I know we have a men's ministry starting out. Grab one another and experience rest together. Women in the room, grab one another and experience rest together. Do something that you like to do. If you need help planning a day of rest, you're not sure where to start or where to go, seriously, come talk to me. Men in the room, I would love for you to join me on an afternoon of rest. I try to take Fridays, and I try to be intentional about resting because I know that I need that, and I also know that God has called me to that. So if you want to join me, seriously, come talk to me. I invite you. If another day works better for you, come talk to me. This is something that I'm passionate about. I would love to be able to Sabbath with you and to rest with you. I think our culture, we need to learn to slow down. We need to learn to slow down. So those of you that raised your hand, you felt busy this morning, which I think was the majority of the room. This isn't a sermon to listen to and then walk out and just let it go by the wayside. No, step up and make a change. If you're in a busy season right now, you're going to continue to be in a busy season until you make an intentional change. See it is important not only for you, but for your family, for your kids and your grandkids. See how important it is to show them and model for them a healthy rhythm to life. This idea of rest falls into this idea of rhythm, that we work and we rest and we work and we rest. Just like music, model a healthy rhythm of life for your kids and your grandkids. I believe the number one thing that Satan uses to attack us, to tempt us, to hurt our faith, is our time. He makes us busy. He wants us busy. He wants us to think that we're getting things done at our job or for our company, at work. He wants us to think that we're doing good things and that we need to go in extra time. He wants to encourage us of all these goals that we can meet and make us feel good, because Satan doesn't want us spending time with God. So Satan will do anything to make you feel busy. Maybe you enjoy being busy. Maybe you enjoy running to place. And that's even better for Satan. I ask you to get in the routine of experiencing true biblical, healthy, spiritual rest. I speak from experience. It truly will change your life. It will truly change your outlook on who God is. It is good for your soul. It will impact your faith journey. It will draw you closer to Jesus. You'll have a better attitude. You'll have more energy. And ultimately, a more effective rhythm to life. The creation story finishes with rest. All of God's commandments to the Israelites finish with rest. God's creation personally finished with rest. Our work week should finish with rest. And ultimately, our existence will finish with rest. We will enter into this spiritual rest. As I quoted earlier, Peter Buckland had that idea, that thought, that Sabbath is where heaven and earth commingle. I believe that what we experience when we rest is what we will experience when we enter into eternity. I think our goal as Christians, the ministry that we're called to do here on earth, is to bring kingdom here to earth, to bring things heavenly here to earth, to bring Jesus' love here to earth, to bring things that don't make sense here to earth. And I think rest is one of those things. We are called to establish this healthy rhythm to life now. Not wait until we die and, finally I've got this healthy rhythm to life. Not where I just sit back and do nothing. No, but where I honor God and worship God through work, but also through rest. God calls us to that. Hebrews 4, 9 through 11. So then there remains a rest for the people of God. For whoever has entered God's rest has also rested from his works, as God did from his. Let us therefore strive to enter that rest, so that no one may fall by the same sort of disobedience. And doesn't that idea of entering into this rest just calm you? Doesn't it just calm your nerves? Don't you look forward to it? You don't have to only look forward to it. You can experience it now. You really can. When God talks about rest in Scripture, he is serious. When God's people don't abide, as we read earlier, he's very straightforward. He says, put them to death. He wants us to experience rest. Rest is important to us, and it's not an option for us. It's not just for our good, but it's to acknowledge who God is. He's called us to it. It's a time to acknowledge him as creator, sustainer, and provider. Above all, keep my Sabbath. It is a sign, it is a covenant between God and his creation. God was not happy when the Israelites went out into the field together and didn't keep his Sabbath. And they didn't end up finding anything. In God's miraculous ways, he's able to provide 7 days worth of whatever we need. Finances, goods, income, in 6. I know we like choices. We want to be able to choose. We don't go to a dealership that only sells red cars. We usually don't go to a restaurant that only sells one thing unless that one thing is really, really good. Right? We want to be able to choose here or now. Here or there, now or later, black or white, blue or red. We want to be able to choose. Yet God doesn't give us a choice when it comes to how he wants us to live and what he wants us to do. What he calls us to is uncomfortable. Giving your first 10%, that idea of first fruits, that's not easy. Whenever we get our check in and we know that we have medical bills piling up, is it easy to take out 10% or more and say, this is going to God, now I'll do what I can with this? No, that's not easy. It's also not easy to plan for a day of rest And whenever you think, I've got all these things going on at work, I've got all these things that I have to do, all these places that I have to go, and to say, but on this day, for this amount of time, that's going to be God's time. That's going to be my Sabbath time, my rest time. It's not easy, but I promise you, it's so worth it. It is so worth it. Just experience it. Give it a try. Something miraculous will happen if you give God your time. I guarantee that if you make time to rest, true, healthy spiritual rest, not just relaxation, but true, healthy spiritual rest, I guarantee that that workload that seems to be piling up at work will slowly start to dwindle down miraculously. I'm going to invite the worship team to come up. I want to leave you with one last scripture. Matthew 11, 28 through 29. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls.